Read alouds in your class every single day is one of the most important things you can do. So important, in fact, that my professor, Michiko, told me if I do not read to my kids every single day, she will come and hunt me down in my classroom. So definitely do read alouds every day. Some things that read aloud should include, you should always pick books that are in the zone of proximal development for the general kids in your class. They should just be one step above where they are reading at their reading level. Never read a book that you have not read and practiced and planned stopping points for. You should always plan in advance what you want to talk about, the intention you want to set with your book, and go ahead and just put some post-it notes in the actual book of things that you want to talk about. Some of them, as you go, the kids might catch on to right away, and you might get to skip some of them, or things might come up that you never planned. But at least then it gives you somewhere to go off of if you plan in advance. So I always just stick some sticky notes right in there of questions I want to ask or connections that I want to make, in addition to the ones that the kids will naturally make on their own. You also can kind of start out the book if it's more of a difficult book, or I've talked about my Patricia Polacco author study, and she is Russian and also Jewish, and so since her stories are true stories about her and her family, a lot of the vocabulary is vocabulary that I was unfamiliar with at first because it's a lot of Russian and Jewish terms that I didn't know. So go ahead and start off. I just usually write on chart paper or maybe a smart board if you have one, the vocab that they might see in the book that they might be unfamiliar with. And then as far as during the actual read aloud, Wilhelm talks a lot about how you need to decide on a few strategies to teach before you start. And those are going to be the things you can stop. A lot of those books you can kind of take in lots of different directions. So just for your own sake and for your kids' sake, you need to focus it on one or two strategies that you want to look at. And then those can be the things that you pre-mark in your book of stopping places. You also want to make a goal for what you want to accomplish during the read aloud. An example might be focusing on character building or something like that. And then you also want to think aloud to students. You want to make it so evident that there's not one student that doesn't catch on to what your intentions are. So even if it's something you think all your kids are catching on to, you might think aloud during the book and say, I'm really noticing during the keeping quilt that Patricia Polacco is having all of the illustrations in black and white, but just the quilt in color. This is making me think that maybe the quilt has a really important significance. And maybe as we read along, we can try to find what this quilt represents in the story. And then as you go through the story, you can keep coming back to that and noticing and thinking aloud until at the end you kind of talk about the theme of the book and family heritage and traditions and talk about how that quilt represents that. You also, at the end, want to have students identify other situations where they can use these same strategies. So with that same example I just gave of the keeping quilt, you could talk about how have students come up with ideas of how that type of illustrations and detail and purpose behind those illustrations would be things that they could use in one of their pieces, and they could chat about that and give each other advice. Ray also talks a lot about how during the read aloud you want to talk about what the author intentionally did. And so you want to make it very clear that the reason why the book is written the way that it is because the author intentionally did that. That kind of puts them in the author's shoes, and it allows them to kind of start internalizing and seeing themselves as authors as well and as writers as well, and giving them kind of the agency to be able to try out those same things in their writing as they see that it was an author that made those decisions and that they can do that as well. On top of that, lastly, I just kind of want to talk about how for read alouds, just having a variety of serious books, of poetry, of chapter books, different family structures, different races, different ethnicities, books around the world. I mean, read alouds are a great way to travel all around the world and see stories that are similar to the students in your classroom, and stories that are completely different, possibly more importantly, than the students in your classroom. And just kind of really using read-alouds as a great way to introduce social justice, and just fun books that you think your kids will be able to connect with and will just enjoy, and give them some more information.